Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football here on the Sports History Network. Aside from my podcasting duties, I'm also a sports collector. And as such, I'm very pleased to share the exciting news that the Sports History Network has partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get deals on over 30,000 autograph sports collectibles. So as a collector, I was very pleased when I visited the site of Rochester Sports Autographs. The massive inventory is easy to search, carefully documented, and visually appealing. The options seem limitless, whether you're looking for an autographed baseball, signed football helmets, or basketball jerseys, among thousands of others. I found everything from a Babe Ruth autograph, a signed football by Dick Butkus, and an autographed Larry Bird basketball jersey. And as a collector, you'll be delighted with the very competitive pricing on JSA authenticated products. Made possible since RSA deals directly with athletes, so there's no extra markup, and the savings are passed on directly to the customer. Perhaps you're looking for an early gift for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Heck, who needs a holiday as an excuse to give a piece of sports history to your loved ones? Or how about yourself? Today seems like a great day to add to your own sports collection, right? RSA even has film, music, and other entertainment autographs on the site, so there's something for everyone. All orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. And to make sure RSA knows that the Sports History Network sent you, we created a special link for you. All you need to do is head to shoprsa.com/SHN. That's shoprsa.com/SHN to get your own piece of sports history today.
Hey, this is Darren Hayes. You've probably heard me on the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch. Well, welcome to my journey of learning more about sports history, and we're going to do it by learning about the great athletes and the uniforms that they wore, as they both tell a lot about the games that we love and have watched so much throughout most of our lives. These are the chronicles I'm going to share with you on what I've learned through my journey in the Sports Jersey Dispatch. Hello, my friends of sports history. This is Darren Hayes of the Sports Jersey Dispatch podcast. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your place for all things great in sports history. And welcome to another episode where we are going to talk to a guest that has a vintage collection of memorabilia that's very exciting to the sports world. We have heard him many times over on his own podcast, When Football Was Football. He has multiple books on NFL history and some other football history, including When Football Was Football and the Bears versus Cardinals. Joe Ziemba is his name, and we've talked to him quite a bit over on the Pigskin Dispatch side. Joe, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Darren, thanks so much for having me again. I always say it's an honor, but it truly is. And to talk about some of these things that maybe we haven't shared a lot with people, football history, and now talking about collectibles. So looking forward to it, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I know we've talked to you a lot about football over on Pigskin Dispatch, but early on this podcast, we had you some guest appearances talking about some baseball here and there. You've talked to us about some White Sox memories that you had and some things that we did early on in the program. So we appreciate you for that. So you are not only known as a football historian, but you have we know you got that baseball in you too, and some other surprises we're going to throw in this episode as well. But Joe, we talked and you showed me a few items. You have some photos that we're going to put up on jerseydispatch.com of parts of your collection. And I was wondering, if we could go through them, piece by piece, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about them, maybe there's a story behind them, how you got them, if you, in memory of the individuals that they concern, or some items like that. Well, that would be great just to preserve sports history.
No, I'd love to talk about that. And Darren, I'm a collector who didn't know he was a collector. And all of a sudden, after a lifetime of experiences, you look in the basement and say, what's in these boxes? And so there's a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I look forward to that. Baseball was my first love. I grew up in a football family, but love baseball, love the Chicago White Sox, and look forward to an annual trip or two to Comiskey Park or some guys on the south side called Kaminsky Park. Now White Sox Park, it has different names with the new ball field. But yeah, I started out playing baseball as a kid, as most of us did, collecting baseball cards, but I wasn't very good at the sport. I remember being put in T-ball by my dad, and I was so bad I struck out 4 times in one game. Just kind of hard to think about it in T-ball. And that's when they give you 30 swings to strike out. But I remember I was disappointed because the coach came to me and said, Joe, I don't know if you have it. And I was 4 or 5 years old. And he said, we're going to have to make a move for the good of the organization. And he traded me for a large chocolate shake at Dairy Queen. But the bad part was my dad was the coach. But we got along after that.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds a lot like my story with my dad coaching. It's definitely. Well, speaking of Comiskey, you have a great artifact from Comiskey that you shared in a photo, and it's looks like a piece of building material, and perhaps you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, this is neat. I've always wanted to buy something from the ballpark over the years, and this is before eBay came into more familiarity. But you'd see things you'd like to buy, and I thought, oh, it'd be great to have a seat and mount it in the backyard on the patio, but I couldn't afford it. And then when the old Comiskey was torn down, some entrepreneurs collected the bricks and put a little plaque on them and sold the bricks, and they sold quite well. And I was one of those that was very happy to have it. It's still on display in my house. Even on one side of it has a little bit of the old white paint because the ballpark was painted white in its later years. And it proudly tells us, yeah, this is a brick from old Comiskey Park. So really happy to have that. And again, so many memories from that place. And of course, we all had baseball cards back then. And I don't know if you've had baseball card collectors, but what an industry that's become. And you kind of wish, like a lot of people, you had those old cards that maybe you didn't get a clothespin and put them on the spoke of your bike to make a noise when you went by and you had a 1952 Mickey Mantle or something worth $10 billion. But we would get those cards and talk about the White Sox and listen to the games on little transistor radios and go through our cards. And Easter was the big day, Darren. On Easter, you still wouldn't get an Easter basket. You're too big. You're 7 or 8 or whatever. But you'd get a pack, one of those single packs of Tops, and Tops would come out, and it smelled so good with the bubble gum. And the rich kids on the block, they would get a whole box of Tops. I was so jealous, but they weren't really rich. I don't know. Their dad probably just found a deal somewhere from someone else. But you'd go through your new cards and go, got them, don't got them, got them, and toss them in and trade if you have doubles of one guy. And maybe I got a nice Sherman Lawler card from the White Sox or a Larry Doby, and then you'd kind of like to see if you could finish your collection for the year. But it was so exciting to have our own team right there on the south side of Chicago and collect the cards of the players you were able to see out there. And of course, later in life, you learn nobody's really from Chicago. They're all from all over the place. I was disappointed at first, but later I understood.
Yeah, that was always, I can remember, collecting football cards and baseball cards when I was a kid. It was like a mini Christmas, because they would always come out, the new ones, like the beginning of summer, it seemed like, for football anyway. And you go to the corner store that was right around from my house, and I think each pack was $0.25 or something, and you'd save your pennies up for the week, and you'd go over there and buy a pack or two and take it home and unwrap that paper. It was almost like opening up a present. And
and the smell,
the smell, and then you put the gum in your mouth and you say, well, maybe the card tastes better than this, but might be more chewable. But we weren't collecting the gum, that's for sure. I
remember one guy in the block who said he wasn't going to open one of his packs every year, and we'd say, why won't you open it? Could be somebody good. It could be a Mickey Mantle or Hank Aaron or Willie Mays. He said, no, I'm going to save it. Could be valuable someday. And we go, oh no, these cards aren't going to be worth anything. So I bet that guy, he's probably living in a 42-bedroom house now, selling those cards.
Probably is. You're probably right. Very, very interesting. But you have another artifact that's connected to baseball that's extremely interesting. It looks like it's in a frame, and it looks like a cover of a well-known publication with a famous picture on it.
Yeah, that would be Life magazine, and Joe DiMaggio the famous Yankee Clipper. And near the conclusion of his life, I shouldn't say conclusion, but he was still around signing autographs at places, as were guys like Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams. And they'd always stop somewhere around the Chicago area. And this is actually when I was out of the house and married and was working, so I could go to one of these things and plop down a few bucks and get one of those just because I liked it. That was the fun of it. You could finally afford to buy someone's autograph. And it wasn't very expensive then, maybe $20 compared to what it might be today. But just the thrill of waiting in line and saying, oh, there's Mickey Mantle. That was my hero. And, of course, later in life, we know more about Mickey, and I've read the books about his off-field capabilities and things he'd like to do, and you wonder, oh wow, but no, that was the Mick. He glowed. And Joe DiMaggio was very friendly. We heard things that he wasn't, but he's a little older by then. But just so neat to have some of these photos and autographs of players that you grew up really admiring and found out that they were people like us.
Now, from what I understand, you also had him sign your Mr. Coffee coffee pot that you use every morning too. No, that's just
as long as it was decaf,
there.
Darren, because you put caffeinate me, I'm gone forever. So I apologize.
That is a very, very cool thing to have framed, and I'm sure it looks quite elegant in your collection, hanging on the wall or on your table, however you have it.
Yeah.
But something that really catches your eye, and this is, the photos you sent me, this is what really jumped out at me and I studied the most, is you have a picture of a lot of encased baseballs with some writing on it. And, really excited to hear about these.
Yeah, I started collecting baseballs, and again, didn't know I was a collector, but I thought I would try and find at some of these shows as an adult, getting major league leaders to sign a ball. And so that way I've got, say, Pete Rose, who was the hits leader. Got I think a Willie Mays in there, and a Mickey Mantle again, Don Larson, who threw a perfect game. So they're all ones that I decided to limit my interest to those who were done something special, like a perfect game in the 56 World Series by Don Larson, or if he was a favorite player or a record holder along the way. So I've got to dust those off. At least I had the foresight to put them in plastic cases and kind of have them on display in my little office here up in the attic, where normally it's football going on. So those baseballs, they probably get together and they talk about me, but I hope it's good stuff.
Yeah, one of the ones in the foreground of the photo you sent that we have posted, it looks like it might say Hank Aaron on it. Is that?
That's right. Hank Aaron, what a gentleman. Yeah, and I was able to get his signature on a ball. I remember I even got a Bob Feller in there. Bob Feller pitched. He was a teenage phenom way back when, and he was still signing balls well into his career, or former career, ex-career. So it's kind of neat to have those and the little stories, which you're, I guess, bringing back in my mind now when I got those and my reaction to them. And again, Bob Feller, wow, Rapid Robert. And here he is in front of me, and I'm talking to him, and here I am, an old man myself, and I can't speak English, but that was great.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting in that collection. And you also collect a lot of other things. And I think, before we came on, you were talking and telling me how you did that. Your collection sort of morphed over into other areas outside of sports. And you sent a couple photos of those items as well. And we would love to hear about those as well. One in particular, it looks like it's something fairly popular from the 60s. We had the space age going on, and it looks very interesting. I see the word moon on it.
All right. One of the things that I really was happy about was as a kid, you hear about astronauts and going into the last frontier, and we morphed over from Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone to Alan B. Shepard and John Glenn and all those heroes. And I think just about every astronaut from that early Mercury program wrote a book. And my first job in downtown Chicago was right across from a Croc and Brentano's bookstore, a really big one. Of course, Crocs and Brentano's, I don't think are with us any longer, along with a lot of the other bookstores, unfortunately. But they would have their authors come in, and I was able to meet Alan Shepard, who had written a book, First Man in Space, Of course, John Glenn did the 3 orbits, but Alan Shepard was in space first and got his autograph. And I think I've got several of them that are Neil Armstrong, who was very reluctant to sign. I don't have a book by him signed, but I took a chance of writing him a letter a few years after he was on the moon, and just asked if he'd like to be interviewed for a magazine I was working on at the time, which really had nothing to do with space. And he wrote right back and politely declined, but signed it. And I've always worried to get a check because did he use an automatic pen, which collectors are afraid of? And I don't think he did, because this was maybe after the wave of popularity had coasted down a little bit. And so having a Neil Armstrong letter to myself is really one of my favorite pieces of collection. So, yeah, I got into signed books, and then signed books by athletes. Bill Bradley, the former Princeton, New York Knicks star, wrote a book, was able to get signed. One of my favorites for a couple of reasons was Jerry Lucas, who played at Ohio State. Remember the Olympic team in the 60s, All-American. Also played pro ball, but he was a memory expert. And I met him, this is going into the 80s, I think, when I was a young conference organizer. And we would get speakers, hopefully a named speaker. And I got him because he was a basketball player and he had his books there. But this memory technique he had, he could memorize literally phone books, and people he met the entire weekend, he would call them up by name. And so I wanted to learn how to do that. And I got his book, and he inscribed it to my wife and I, and read the book, and it didn't help. I guess I missed some brain participles up there somewhere, Darren. It didn't help with my memory.
You're trying to increase your memory, and you forgot what the book said.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's you have a photo of that book that you shared with us, and we appreciate that. Now, this next item we want to talk about, I'm not sure if you got it yesterday, but it must have been a hard day's night, 8 days a week when you got this next photo.
This is the Beatles before Ringo Starr was the drummer. That's another interesting story. I think his name was Pete Best. Well, I know his name was, but I think I've got this at a show in northern Indiana where he lived for a while, or he was visiting or something. But sometimes you have things in your collection you don't really think about. I wanted an autograph from a Beatle, still can't afford one, but got Pete Best, who was in the band, and so there's a picture of him with John and Paul and George of the Beatles before Ringo took over. So you feel kind of sorry for Pete Best, but I'm always proud. In fact, I've got that photo on display now, and everyone wants to know, who is that? Especially you got kids or grandkids and stuff, and they're saying, who is that guy? And then the worst, of course, who are the Beatles? But that's another story.
Yeah, that's very cool. I didn't recognize that Pete Best was in there. I was thinking it was the whole Beatles that we're familiar with Ringo.
Yeah, so it's one of those photos that's cool, but not worth anything. And I did spend time with a rock and roll magazine, got to meet a lot of rock and roll stars. And one of the fun things about them was getting backstage passes, because you were considered legitimate to go and interview a big star. And sometimes either I couldn't or didn't really want to go do a photo shoot or an interview with someone. So you would send a couple of people on staff, or if you're really desperate, your wife and her sister. And one of my funniest rock and roll stories was they were just crazy about Tom Jones, the singer from Welsh singer. And women would go crazy. And so they've got my backstage passes was for 2. And my wife was going to take notes, and I was going to write a quick review of the concert. And she took her sister, who was so crazy about Tom Jones, and I gave him a camera. And so when they got to talk to him, ask him a couple of questions that were pre-prepared. And then they said, can we take a photo of you? And he said, of course, ladies. And my sister-in-law, whose name is Shirley, and decided to take a picture of Tom Jones until he pointed and said, ma'am, I think you've got to take the lens cap off. So we were caught.
And he probably said that's most unusual to leave that lens cap on.
Right there.
So, very, very nice. Now, I guess probably the most curious photo that you sent in this part of the collection, it's really intrigued me. I sort of understood and figured out what the other ones were, but you have an image of, it looks like an advertisement of maybe your favorite beverage.
Yes, it's one of those cold beers, or if we call them on the south side, a grog. and you put that in your chalice, not your glass. But it was one of the early endorsements by a professional football player. In this case, it was Pat Harter, the all-pro Chicago Cardinals fullback, who was actually the MVP for the Cardinals in the late 40s, MVP of the league. And so that Blatz beer, I think, a beer that we probably no longer drink.
The only one when I think of Chicago beer, yeah, it's Blatz. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was thinking Goose Island. I'm aware of from Chicago.
Oh, yes. No, you got to be looking at Blatz or Drury's or Schlitz, the beers that used to be famous, or Old Style in Chicago, that are hard to get now. But yeah, I got this. Actually, my son got this for me during the early days of my Cardinals research, which goes back a couple of decades, and he had it framed for me, and it's really a nice piece of art. It's an advertisement showing Pat Harter, as you can see, but the fact that here he is, one of the Cardinals players posing for an advertisement. And a lot of the Cardinals did that. Charlie Trippi and Elmer Angsman posed for milk. I think there's another player who was promoting cigarettes. So here you have one of our heroes with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth in the 40s or 50s. And these early advertisements are such cool pieces of art to display, and great face view of the player. And then his message, of course, which he probably didn't know he said, that is put in there by the marketer. So that was, that's Pat Harter. And I really love that piece, and it hangs proudly in the house.
Well, you have a very interesting and diverse collection, and boy, we really appreciate you sharing it with us today, Joe. And we're going to be talking here very soon on Pigskin Dispatch and talking about some of your football collectibles, and we can't wait to do that too. So we appreciate you coming on and sharing this history with us.
Oh, thanks so much, Darren. Thanks for putting up with me. I hope one or two people have not fallen asleep as we talk about these things, but really, really fun to talk about this and to bring back some memories. Thank you very much.
Sorry, but my pitching coach just called timeout, and he's coming out to the mound. I think I'm going to get yanked for a reliever. We'll see you back tomorrow for some more great sports history on Sports Jersey Dispatch Podcast. We invite you to check out our websites, jerseydispatch.com and pigskindispatch.com. Not only see the daily sports history, but to experience the preservation of great events and people that play the games. Find us on Pigskin Dispatch. It's also on social media outlets of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all your daily sports history. Pigskin Dispatch is happy to be associated with the Sports History Network, the sports headquarters of yesteryear, found at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football, here on the Sports History Network. I'm very pleased to announce that I will be partnering with the Sports History Network to give away 2 copies of my latest book called Bears vs. Cardinals, the NFL's Oldest Rivalry. To enter, just head over to the following link, sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. We hope you will enjoy the numerous stories in the book, which is largely based on the newly released Dutch Tournament collection at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Dutch was the co-owner of the early Chicago Bears with George Halas and kept correspondence, financial records, and scouting reports, which now allow us to peek into the management of an NFL club during the first few years of the league's existence. Along the way, we'll meet unusual gridiron characters from years gone by, including a quarterback who could throw the ball farther behind his back than he could throwing it forward, a Bears lineman who was such a good tavern fighter that he decided to enter the boxing universe, and a Cardinals halfback who gave up the NFL rushing title by deciding to not show up for his team's final game of the season. And can we forget the time the Al Capone mob interrupted a Bears-Cardinals game? The new book was fun to research, and I hope you will enter our free contest today. Once the winners are selected, we'll be in touch regarding shipping as well as to inscribe the book personally for you. This might make a perfect gift for Mother's or Father's Day, or simply add it to your own personal collection. Once again, enter by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Thank you and good luck.